Welcome to this edition of the Million Dollar Mastermind podcast. This is where we pick the brains of high achievers from all walks of life and get their hard-earned, real-world insights on winning. I'm your host, Larry Weidel. So when you got out, what appealed to you? Were you just looking for an income, and how did you what was your first year like out of this military?
Yeah, so I got recruited into insurance sales, and thankfully the niche I got recruited into was the Medicare world. And basically it was, here's a bunch of direct mail lead cards where people had filled out requesting information, and you're going to get in the car and drive 45 miles this way and 45 miles that way and knock on doors and put on your tie and comb your hair and try to get them to let you in the house so you can talk about Medicare plans. And that year would have been rough. I would say by the typical standards, I was good at it, but I also knew pretty quickly, I was like, there's got to be a better way than me, selling 3 or 4 policies a week, knocking on doors, getting yelled at sometimes. And some people were very nice. It wasn't like I was going in and genuinely trying to figure out how I could help put them in a better place. But there was, of course, a lot of reluctance to that. It is a grind, but you got to do what you got to do. And I think that is a defining point, is a lot of people, they want to skip into a level that straight away that maybe you do need to put that sweat equity, in or get to the grindstone and see the people eyeball to eyeball in that process, start at that base level. So I'm glad that I started there. It also helped me gain respect. Now, when I hire salespeople and I put them in a telephonic role, they're doing it on the phone and they're like, man, this is brutal. They all know that the guy that owns the place started out driving around, knocking on doors and getting dogs sicked on them. So it's definitely, the phone can be brutal, but it's not face to face. So it's not the same way. So it's a little bit more safeguarded. But that first year taught me that I needed to figure out a way to get in front of more people. And actually what happened was I was on one of those appointments, and I was probably 10 or 11 months in, and I met someone whose husband, and on one of the appointments I went on, whose husband was a retiree from a large company, and that large company was going to losing their coverage. And he wanted me to come speak to their retiree union. Paraphrasing a little bit, but I went and spoke to them, and there were 72 people there. And I wrote a whole bunch of policies off of this group because they were all like, we like this guy, this young man. He was a Marine, and they liked all that. And so I helped a bunch. It was an AT&T retiree union. And when I helped all them, I thought, how in the world can I get in front of 72 people again that actually want my help versus this one and one and one and one? And so it started making me think a little bit bigger of how can I amplify that. And that's when I started really, really studying marketing and how to use marketing to get in front of more people.
What would you say is you look back, meant the most to you, to your development, to kind of prepare you to take advantage of that when it came along? I mean, were you listening to tapes? Were you doing any extra kind of sales training? Do they have it in the company? What were you doing to keep yourself going? Because that is a grind.
Yeah. So I commonly say I was driving around in a fully unloaded Corolla, manual windows, cloth seats, the works, but I had one of those aux tape deck players where you could put it in and listen to MP3s and podcasts. Yeah. So I was downloading podcast episodes and listening to them on the road. Some of the early ones that everybody is listening to is the ones where they reference University on Wheels, Zig Ziglar. He talked about the University on Wheels. So I was listening to Zig, but then I would get into finding kind of niche specific people in the life insurance world that were talking about things that I was like, okay, this makes sense. It's very close to what I'm doing. It started out with organizational podcasts, time organizational, but getting into just listening to on the road podcasts. And then I found this podcast called The Art of Paid Traffic. I think he's changed the name of it now. But basically, it was just this guy talking about Facebook ads back in 2013, 14, when they first monetized the platform. And that's when my first segue into learning how to be a marketer was Facebook. But it came from podcasts. I was learning on podcasts. So that's why I like doing podcasts now. So hopefully podcasts will help people like it helped me.
Yeah, giving back. That's why we do it. And, I've heard people say my car was my university. And you
Yep.
could choose your professors, and you could choose your curriculum. You can make it very focused on what you want to hear. And
That's right.
so, how did you start to put your company together?
Yeah. So what happened was I started marketing on Facebook, and I had some great success right away. I thought I was a genius marketer. Turns out it was at a period where there was not a lot of competition in the demographics I was targeting. And so I was having a lot of success, but I was getting my phone ringing, heavily, running some dental ads and some other things. And it got to the point where I was getting so many phone calls that I couldn't sell all of the policies. And up until that point, I had only thought like a salesman. I thought, okay, I'm a salesman now, I'm a marketer, but I'm still just an individual, one person. But I thought the only way that I can scale this is to start bringing other people in. And so then we went out and started like hiring agents to work with us. And these agents would assign their commissions to me, but I would handle all the lead flow for them. And then I would pay them a reduced commission based on me doing all the marketing. And then that kind of started to create that nucleus of that structure, and turned into a small agency. Probably a couple of years into that, we had 8 or 9 employees working out of an office. We opened up an office. It was like a 2,200 square foot little retail space where we had a couple of admin and the rest of us agents in there. And we were driving traffic to the office, mostly still through Facebook. We used some traditional media like television or direct mail. And it just started growing that way. And of course, the profit started to grow exponentially just by that compounding effect. That's kind of how it started. There have been some other nuances since then of like other verticals that we've gotten into, but really it just came from saying I could have either spent less money on ads and just kind of took what I get and made what I wanted, but I just wanted to keep growing. I just had this, I don't know where this came from, but now I always tell people, if you're not growing, you're dying. Your business can't just sit there and be stagnant. Like if you have to continue to let it grow. It's designed to grow. And so that's why I started hiring people.
For those of you who are sick and tired of fooling around and are dead serious about wanting to move up fast, I've got something especially for you. I've combined the best insights from over 40 years in business and making $70 million in income and compressed them into a free webinar. That's right, it's a free resource. If you want to find out exactly what the concepts are that I use in coaching $1 million earners, register now at WeidelOnWinning.com. You'll discover the 5-part framework used by so many to reach their financial, personal, and professional goals. You can find that link in this episode's show notes. Well, a couple of points I'd like to pass on and to make for people listening, and they're wanting to move up. Maybe they're working inside of a corporation, but the idea is to learn what you can, do it as well as you can, but get your eye on moving up somewhere. You can move up in another company, keep learning, keep moving up, keep the pressure on in your career. Don't wait for things to come to you, because at every step that creates more possibilities for you. And so as you did, the staggering thing I'd like you to think about and comment on is probably hundreds and hundreds of thousands of young people come into the market every year, and they get a job in one area of sales or another, like you. I don't know if it's selling books or if they sell encyclopedias door to door anymore, but possibly depends, however they're selling, but they're, direct sales. And to go out there and direct sales, financial services, whatever, hundreds of thousands start. And we've all seen these offices where they have 40 to 50 new recruits every week.
Yeah, because they have to burn through them, because so the failure rate is so high. They have.
And so from that ocean, you emerge.
Yeah.
It's kind of staggering, isn't it?
It is. So I think it's Napoleon Hill's book where they talk about the premise 3 feet from gold. Most people are thinking about short sales as a short-term career. And there's a lot of people that have made a lot of money just as a salesperson. I know some guys that are recruiters or individual insurance salespeople that will make $1 million a year with no employees. And what they did is persisted. They stayed at it long enough. I mean, obviously it's, there's ways that you can make it happen faster than others, of course. How aggressive am I? How many contacts am I making? How many relationships am I making? But to be frank, I know plenty of people that are not that great, but they're in it long enough and they're making $250,000, $300,000 a year. But when you think of sales as a short-term thing, it is not. When I first started, it was, if I wouldn't have had that big win 11 months in, I would have probably made $40,000 that year, $45,000, busting my ass. That right there probably put me a little bit further than that. That helped me out. But the thing is, the harder you work and the more people you see, the luckier you'll get because you're putting in that time and those contacts. And I think, thankfully, by content and trying to go to events where I got around other people doing big things, I believed that those big things were happening. And by believing that those big things were happening, it gave me the perseverance to make it through those times.
And so the thing, Justin, looking about the uniqueness of how you propelled yourself from just being the successful salesperson, and had a lot to do with marketing. I mean, it was marketing, right? Because what triggered you getting more people involved was you figured out the marketing funnel and how to fill that up to where there was not enough hours in the day for you to get to all the leads that were coming in. So that seems to be the big marker, the big trigger point. And how did you talk about again how you figured that out, how you made that happen? Or did you even realize that was such a big thing that you were doing?
I think I definitely did. And early on, when I started having a lot of success with paid traffic or digital marketing, I started making relationships, going to top producer events with other people, and we would talk about marketing. And I quickly realized that I was probably doing better at digital marketing than anyone in the space at the time. Now it's come to the point where there's a lot of people doing it, and so it's much more competitive. But I was one of the early adapters. In fact, when I first started running Facebook ads for the 65 plus community as part of the demographic, people would tell me, "Oh, people over 65 aren't on Facebook." I knew that was a lie because my grandmother at the time was in her late 80s or mid 80s, and she was on there asking me for Farmville bucks every day. So I was like, she's clearly on there. 5:30 in the morning every morning, I'm getting Farmville notifications on Facebook from my grandmother. So I knew that it wasn't true, and I knew she couldn't be the only one. So it gave me the confidence to go out and try it. And yeah, I mean, once the phone started ringing, because when you get into insurance sales, nobody's asking you to sell them insurance.
Yeah.
You're having to ask them to let you
Right.
sell them insurance, or to let you at least pitch the product, or at least review what they have so you can see if you can do better. When you run ads and you start getting people calling you saying, "Hey, I saw you on Facebook and I'd like you to help me with my Medicare plan." And then when that happens enough times where you knew it wasn't a fluke, you knew you were onto something. But the compounding effect of being able to help so many people and allowing the internet to build the trust back then really manifested in the commission starting to roll in. Once the commission started to build, I knew I was onto something. I do think that next echelon was the ability to create a high efficiency team out of it. But of course, without the marketing, I just don't think you can do that.
You know, the thing is about salespeople that great salespeople, it is like athletics. It's like Michael Jordan would not be a great NBA coach. The fact that Larry Bird did it, you notice that Magic Johnson didn't stay a coach very long. We knew that wasn't going to last, but Larry Bird actually pulled it off for a while. But very few. It's different skills. You know what I'm saying? And for you to go from sales, a high-level salesperson, to a high-level sales manager is unique combination of skills, but you have to develop those skills. One thing, you got to learn to have more patience.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you start realizing that not all people are created equal. You know that, but nothing will really manifest that knowledge into a more clear painting than managing a lot of people and trying to put them all in the same types of positions. And the good thing is, not everyone has to be the same to do well, and not everyone has to be the top performer. There's going to be people that just have, every now and then, if I hire 10 agents tomorrow, a couple months in, one of them will emerge as the most badass guy there.
Yeah.
That just happens every time. And then a couple of them will quit.
Right.
And then a few of them will be above average, and then a few of them will be average or below average. That's just, it happens every time. It's the same mix, but one person always, just turns into that alpha. And most of the time it's grit. It's the chip on their shoulder. I mean, if I find a guy with a good chip on his shoulder that wants to prove to somebody he's worth something, they'll just go to great lengths to do it.
How do you find out if they've got a chip on their shoulder?
Man, I think you really just have to hire. So when we hire, we'll hire based on it's really just a perceived, is this person smart, hungry, and humble? We hire based on Patrick Lencioni's principles in The Ultimate Team Player.
Yeah.
Or the Ideal Team Player. And he says smart, hungry, and humble. So we're looking for people that are intelligent enough to have a good conversation, that are hungry for more than they're getting out of life. Not like crazy hungry, because it can be, I'm like, okay, you're probably not going to get that here. You need to go start your own business. But then humble, somebody that can, present themselves as not like some bombastic person. We hire based on that. But the person with the chip on their shoulder, you identify after they're already hired. I don't know that I could identify them ahead of time. And as a matter of fact, I probably weed out some people that have chips on their shoulder in the interview process, because what you don't want, and this, because I've made this mistake, is hiring the ultimate salesman, because the ultimate salesman is fine if they don't work in my office. But the ultimate salesperson is typically not always a great team player, and they can create a rough cult.
Prima donna, unfortunately.
Prima donna. Yeah, that's what happens. There's a book by Chet Holmes called The Ultimate Sales Machine.
Yeah.
And he talks about hiring like these insane, sales studs that have egos that are hard to keep in check. And the thing is, they will sell a lot, but if you put them on a team, they will always try to steer that ship in the direction of what benefits them versus the team. And that's not what you want.
And sooner or later, they're going to make a demand that you just can't put up with. You know what I'm saying? They're going to test you, and they're going to, but a lot of times you get a lot of production out of them before that happens.
That's why I have to tell some of my long-term employees at this point that I've had since the beginning. They'll identify these people ahead of time. They'll kind of tell me or make some kind of comment about it.
Yeah.
And I've had one of them that's especially, she's very smart and she picks up on these people early on. And I have to keep telling her, I'm like, just ride the wave.
Yeah.
Just ride the wave.
Yeah.
Like, we don't have to make any rash decisions right now. Just ride the wave. And, if we have to deal with it when it comes, we'll deal with it.
Yeah. Well, one way of quickly finding out who's got a chip on their shoulder is get them in, get them trained, get them started, and then have the first contest, and then have a recognition thing where you make a big deal out of whoever won.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Those people that have the chips on their shoulder, they like accolades, awards. And I did too. I mean, I think I had a chip on my shoulder early on, and I enjoyed the awards. Eventually the new wears off of that, and you're just like, now I'm chasing revenue. So
you create. But what you can do is you wind up creating a chip on their shoulder towards producing. If it's not there, you can crystallize it. I used to have whoever finished second in the contest, I'd make a big deal out of it, like he won and unbelievable, blah, 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 blah. Come on up on stage, and everybody, and they said he once he's up there, they say almost took first place, but I got him up here because I'm so proud of him. I want to let him help me introduce the guy who won.
That's good. We need to start doing that.
Yeah.
I'm going to steal.
You could create some of that chip on the shoulder with recognition contests and all.
You brought up Jordan earlier. I'm sure you've seen some of the footage from like the Last Dance documentary, where he talks about some of the stories that he would pretty much make up to create additional chips on his shoulder to give him that competitive edge.
Always. Yeah. And what I love about that series was at the end, most people don't pay any attention at the end, but at the end, he addresses the people that are critical of him. He says, very quietly, calmly, he says, I know a lot of y'all think that I'm just mean and was too tough on my teammates. And, didn't need to be that rough and everything. And he said, I know, and you feel that way, and that's fine. He said, I understand it. But he said, that's because you've never won anything.
Yeah, that's right. I love that clip. Yeah. When he says, That's you.
Yeah.
Because you've never won anything.
Right.
Yeah. I love it.
But that's true. And
Yeah.
and so the thing is, folks, do you want to win anything or not?
Yeah.
I'd like to thank you for listening to part 2 of this episode of the Million Dollar Mastermind podcast. Timing is everything. You may feel that now is a time to get moving forward so you can do something even greater with your life. Now, if that sounds like you, I've got a free training video to show you how that transformation can take place. Getting introduced to how the cycle of success works has been a major transforming event for so many current $1 million earners. And that's exactly what this video is all about. And yes, it's completely free. Join us at the video at WeidelOnWinning.com. And thanks for being part of our community.